Hey everyone, welcome back. Glad to have you here. Today, we've got a brand new story to dive into. So let's get started. A few years ago, if you had asked me, I would have told you I was a lucky man. My life was simple but good. I had a steady job, a roof over my head, and, most importantly, a wife I adored. I worked 2 jobs, not out of necessity, but because I wanted to. I believed in putting in the effort, saving up, and securing a future for us. Sure, it was exhausting, but I never complained. Every hour, every shift, I did it all for us, for the life I thought we were building together. Our home was modest, but comfortable. Nothing extravagant, nothing out of reach, just enough to feel safe, to feel like we had something of our own. And for a long time, I truly believed I had everything a man could ever ask for. A wife who looked at me like I was her whole world. A partner who waited for me to walk through the door after a long shift. Someone who sent me messages during the day, telling me she missed me, reminding me to take care of myself, and saying those 3 little words, I love you. And I believed her. I trusted her. Because when you love someone, you don't second-guess them. You don't sit around wondering if every word out of their mouth is a lie. You just trust, you just believe. And that's exactly what I did. I believed every message, every smile, every promise. But life has a way of proving you wrong when you least expect it. Love can blind you, make you see what you want to see. And I was no exception. I thought I had a perfect marriage. I thought I had a faithful wife. But the truth? The truth was something else entirely. And one day, I would wake up to a reality I never saw coming. It started like any other evening. I had just gotten home from work, my body aching from another long shift. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the neighborhood, and all I wanted was a shower, a hot meal, and maybe a few hours of sleep before my next shift. That's when my neighbor called out to me. Now, let me be clear, I wasn't particularly close to my neighbors. Sure, I'd nod, maybe exchange a quick how's it going, if we happened to cross paths, but that was about it. No real conversations, no friendships, just polite acknowledgement and nothing more. So when this man, an older guy, probably in his late 50s, the kind who always sat on his porch, watching everything unfold on the street, motioned for me to come over, I wasn't sure what to expect. I walked up, wiping the sweat from my forehead. He looked uneasy. His eyes shifted, darting around like he was making sure no one else was listening. Look, I don't want to stir up any trouble, he started, shifting in his chair. And maybe it's not my place to say anything, but I've noticed something. Your wife, she's been bringing a man home when you're at work. I blinked. Then I laughed, more out of disbelief than anything else. A man, I repeated, shaking my head. Nah, if she's had someone over, it's probably just a cousin or something. Maybe a friend from work. He didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. He just gave me this look, something unreadable, something I couldn't quite place. I don't think so, he said quietly. It's the same guy. I've seen him more than once. And it's always when you're not around. I stood there, suddenly feeling like the air had thickened around me. For a brief moment, I almost let his words sink in. Almost. But no, this was absurd. My wife, the woman who checked in on me throughout the day, the one who kissed me goodbye every morning, the one who loved me. She wouldn't do something like that. I forced a chuckle and waved him off. I appreciate the concern, really. But you've got to be mistaken. He hesitated, like he wanted to say more. But in the end, he just gave me a slow nod. Maybe I am, he said. I walked away, shaking my head, trying to brush it off. And I tried. That night, lying in bed, his words kept echoing in my mind. No matter how much I wanted to dismiss them, I couldn't shake the thought. I kept telling myself there was a logical explanation. Something simple, something harmless. Maybe it really was just a relative. Maybe it was a coworker. Maybe it was nothing at all. But no matter how many times I tried to convince myself, the doubt wouldn't go away. I needed to know. Not because I thought she had betrayed me. No, not that. I needed to prove to myself that she hadn't. The following day, while she was out running errands, I set up a few discrete cameras, small enough to go unnoticed, but with memory cards to store everything they captured. I wasn't about to spend a fortune on high-tech surveillance, just something simple, something effective. I placed them strategically, only in a few select spots where I knew she wouldn't think to look. I wasn't hoping to catch her doing anything wrong. I was hoping to prove my neighbor wrong. I needed reassurance, needed to confirm that my wife was exactly who I believed she was. But as I positioned the last camera, My hands trembled. The mere fact that I was doing this felt like a betrayal in itself. And yet, I couldn't ignore the nagging doubt. If she was innocent, these recordings would be nothing more than wasted footage. But if she wasn't, then I needed to know. So, I waited. Days passed before I finally sat down to check the recordings. By then, I had almost convinced myself there was nothing to find. The cameras had been unnecessary. I had let some old man's words get under my skin for no reason. I opened my laptop, clicked through the files, and watched. At first, everything seemed normal. My wife moved about the house, watching TV, cooking, going through her usual routine. Nothing suspicious, nothing out of place. A wave of relief washed over me. I nearly deleted the files right then and there, ready to put the whole thing behind me. But something made me keep watching. And that's when I saw it. She stood in the living room, smiling as she poured 2 glasses of wine. A man I had never seen before walked in. He wasn't a cousin. He wasn't a coworker. He was a stranger. The way she greeted him, the ease with which they moved around each other, it was obvious. They were comfortable. Too comfortable. I kept watching as they settled onto the couch, sitting too close. Then he leaned in, kissed her, slid an arm around her waist. A pressure tightened in my chest, but I couldn't look away. Moments later, they got up, hand in hand, and walked upstairs. To our bedroom. A sharp breath caught in my throat. My mouth was dry. Still, I didn't stop the video. I sat there, frozen, as they disappeared beyond the bedroom door, the same door I had walked through countless times, thinking it was a sanctuary for us. And now, I knew exactly what was happening on the other side. Then came the final blow. After a while, the man emerged, wearing my bathrobe, the one I reached for every morning after a shower. I couldn't take it. I had to pause the video, shut my eyes, force myself to breathe through the sinking emptiness. I could have confronted her. I could have demanded answers, demanded why. Why she did this. Why she lied to my face. Why she let another man into our home. But I knew how that conversation would go. She'd deny. She'd twist the truth. She'd cry, beg, tell me it was a mistake, that it meant nothing, that she still loved me. Maybe she'd even blame me. Say I worked too much. Say I didn't give her enough attention. Say it was my fault. No, I wasn't going to give her that chance. I wouldn't let her turn this around, wouldn't give her a single excuse to manipulate the situation. She wasn't going to see me hurt, wasn't going to get the satisfaction of knowing she had broken me. Instead, I made a decision. No arguments. No fights. No warnings. She wouldn't even know that I knew. I was going to leave, but I had to do it the right way. Walking away wasn't enough. I needed to disappear completely. No loose ends. No way for her to find me. The first step was money. I already worked 2 jobs, so saving up without raising suspicion was easy. Since I had always handled our finances, shifting things around wouldn't seem unusual. I cut back on unnecessary expenses, tightened my spending, and tucked away every spare dollar. She never noticed. She was too distracted, too caught up in her world to see what was happening right under her nose. Next, I opened a private account through a global payment service. I knew draining our joint account all at once would be too obvious. So instead, I moved small amounts, just a few hundred at a time, spread out over weeks. Slow enough not to trigger alarm, but steady enough to ensure I wouldn't leave empty-handed. Then came the credit cards. We shared a few, and I needed to cut that tie before I left. So I told her I was switching banks, consolidating our finances for better management. She didn't question it. She didn't question anything. And that, more than anything, told me I was making the right choice. She barely paid attention when I spoke about our finances. As long as she had access to what she needed, the details never mattered to her. One by one, I shut down our shared accounts, making sure that when I was gone, she wouldn't be able to trace my movements through financial records. Quitting my jobs was the final step. I kept it quiet, handling my resignations professionally, leaving on good terms so that no one would have a reason to wonder where I had gone. When my boss asked about my plans, I simply said I was moving on to a better opportunity in another city. My coworkers shook my hand, wished me well, told me to keep in touch, never realizing that once I walked out of that office, they would never hear from me again. Through it all, she remained completely unaware. And at the same time, she was still bringing him into our home, still using our bed for something it was never meant for. The night before I left, I sat in the living room, taking it all in for the last time. Every familiar detail, the worn-in couch, the framed photos, the space that had once felt like a sanctuary, felt foreign now. This wasn't my home anymore. It was just a place where I had been made a fool. I reached for my wedding ring, that simple band of gold that had once symbolized love, trust, and a promise that had never been kept. Rolling it between my fingers, I felt its weight one last time before discarding it. I wouldn't need it where I was going. At 3:45 a.m., with a single bag slung over my shoulder, I stood at the door. No hesitation. No second thoughts. I turned the handle, stepped outside, and let the door click shut behind me. I never looked back. By the time the sun rose, I was already gone. At the time, I had no idea how it all played out on her end. But later, I learned the details. That morning, she woke up to an empty bed. At first, she must have thought nothing of it. Maybe I was in the shower. Maybe I had gone out early. But as she moved through the house, calling my name, the silence must have started to sink in. She checked every room. Nothing. My boots were gone. My jacket was missing. The spot where I always left my keys by the door was empty. Then came the phone calls. First to me, straight to voicemail. Again and again, no answer. Panic rising, she dialed my job, only to be told that I had quit last week. That was when the reality must have hit her. I wasn't just gone. I had disappeared. The final blow came when she rushed to the bank, desperate for some kind of explanation, only to find out that our joint account had been emptied. By the time she realized what had happened, there was nothing left for her to take. And in that moment, she understood. I hadn't just left. I had erased myself from her life completely. I didn't know how long she searched for me, how many desperate hours she spent trying to figure out where I had gone. But over time, I heard the details. She hired a private investigator, spent money she probably couldn't afford, chasing after a ghost. But the more she searched, the more she realized just how carefully I had planned my exit. Every move had been deliberate, every step calculated. And as time passed, I heard that regret consumed her. She couldn't fix it. She couldn't explain it away. She couldn't even beg for forgiveness. There was no way to undo what she had done, no way to turn back time. She had no one to blame but herself. And maybe that was the worst part of it all, the realization that she had destroyed something she could never get back. While she was drowning in regret, I was already far away. I left the country, putting miles and oceans between myself and everything that had tied me to the past. I settled on a quiet island in the Bahamas, where no one knew my name and where the weight of my old life couldn't reach me. Life moved at a slower pace there, simpler, quieter. And in that peace, I found something I hadn't even realized I was missing. At first, I kept to myself. The solitude became a kind of refuge, a way to rebuild from the inside out. But eventually, I met someone. She was different from the rest. Kind. Genuine. She didn't try to change me or mold me into something I wasn't. She respected me for who I was. And in her, I found what real love was supposed to be: simple, honest, built on mutual trust. We created a life together, one that was free of lies and betrayals. And when our daughter was born, I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had made the right decision. This was the family I had always wanted. The kind of love I had once believed in. The future I thought had been stolen from me. And that old life? It was gone. Years passed before she finally found me. By then, I wasn't hiding anymore. Not really. But I had moved on. I had built something real. And there was nothing left for her to take from me anymore. Life in the Bahamas had given me everything my old life never could: peace, honesty, and freedom from the weight of betrayal. I had a family now, a wife who truly loved me, a daughter who was my entire world. The past no longer held any power over me. I had stopped thinking about it, stopped letting it define me, until the day it showed up at my door. I didn't see her first. She saw me. Somehow, after all these years, she had managed to track me down. She flew across the world, desperate to find whatever piece of me still existed in her mind. And then, there I was, standing outside like any other day, holding my daughter's hand as she tugged at me excitedly, pointing at something she wanted from the market. That was the moment my past finally caught up with me. She must have stood there for a long time, watching, trying to process what she was seeing. This wasn't what she had expected. Maybe she thought she'd find me bitter, broken, still carrying the weight of what she had done to me. Maybe she imagined I had spent all these years haunted by her betrayal, looking over my shoulder, unable to move forward. Instead, she found a man who had healed. Someone who had rebuilt. Someone untouched by the scars she thought would define him forever. She had traveled all this way, spent all these years searching. And yet, now that she was here, she had no idea what to do. She took a hesitant step closer, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came out. She whispered my name, her voice barely above a breath, a plea, a last, desperate attempt to reach something, anything that still connected us. But there was nothing left. For a brief moment, she searched my face, hoping to find recognition, some trace of the past, something that told her I still remembered, that I still cared. But all she found was silence. A quiet, empty space where her presence no longer mattered. She stood there, waiting for something, an explosion of anger, a confrontation, even a cruel remark. But I gave her nothing. And that's when she finally understood. She wasn't here to fix anything. She wasn't here to make amends. She was here to face the truth that she no longer had any place in my life. Without hesitation, I turned away, took my daughter's hand, and walked. I didn't look back. Not once. As I walked, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no regret. Just peace, the kind that comes when you finally understand that the past holds no power over you anymore. There was a time when I thought her betrayal would haunt me forever, that I would never heal, never be free. But in the end, she had erased everything we once had. Years of love, trust, and shared memories, all undone by a single choice. But that was another lifetime. A closed chapter. One I had no interest in reopening. Some betrayals are not meant to be forgiven, only forgotten. Now, I want to hear from you. If you had been in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you have confronted her? Would you have walked away like I did? Or would you have chosen a different path? Let me know in the comments. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, share it with them. Maybe, just maybe, they'll find the answer they've been searching for. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more crazy stories. See you next time.